Now,
So I'm here speaking to Michael Aiken. He's the script writer behind a fabulous script called $1 Down, which is in competition at our Nice Festival. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And welcome to our festival.
Great to be here, Steve.
Thank you. If you could just explain to me your background, your what the careers you have up to date, and how you came to write the script, and why you wrote the script, and what the script's about.
Certainly. Well, I started out when I was going to be a writer.
Yeah.
I actually, I wrote for my junior high school paper, my high school paper, and wrote for the city paper. So as I was growing up, I thought I was going to be a writer. But I also loved business, and I ended up getting a master's in accounting and an MBA in international management and learning different languages. So my career ended up being international finance. And so for the last 30 years, that's what I've been doing, and my focus is working for companies in Latin America, generally U.S. companies, but also other companies in Latin America, using my language skills. But I never lost that desire to write, and I've written things all through the years, but they've mainly been technical, boring accounting stuff, technical bulletins, and that kind of stuff.
So, but in the background was always to do something creative still, I guess. It must
Right.
be,
Yeah, and that's why when I went from my writing to my business career, it's because the writing had become that mechanical nature.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do was to write from inspiration, and so I knew that as I went through life, I would see things, especially in the career that I've chosen, that would really build a wealth of experiences from which I could draw. So over the last years, I've seen a lot of things, and I've seen, with respect to business, I've seen how the dollar, which has served as the global currency since World War II, I've seen things unfold that are working, forces that are working to undermine that.
And you've actually physically seen this
Yes.
with the job, the career you've had, how people would like to undermine what the dollar is and stands for the value of the dollar.
Undoubtedly. There are countries, major countries now, that don't like what they call the exorbitant privilege. I mean, the dollar being a global currency, for example, if we're in France. In France, if they want to buy oil, they have to sell their currency and buy dollars to buy the oil. And if we want dollars, in America, all we have to do is print them. We don't have to earn them. So that's a huge advantage. That's a way to monetize your debt.
Right.
And that's allowed the U.S. to run these big debts without any major negative consequence on the dollar, because of the global demand for dollars. Just the petrodollar system, for example, which you have to sell your currency to buy oil, that creates about $3 trillion of demand for the dollar per year. So when we got off the gold standard in 1971, that's when Kissinger went over and talked with the Saudis and came up with this absolutely brilliant scheme.
If you're a US citizen, yeah.
If you're a US citizen. And therefore, that is why a lot of countries, and I understand it, having lived in other countries, in Mexico and in Peru and China, I understand that if I were not an American, I would feel some resistance to that, because why, over the last few decades, the share of America in the global economy has shrunk. Our gold reserves have gone from 20,000 tons down to less than half that, and so people ask the question today, why, if the dollar represents 20% of the global economy, why is the dollar, the global currency, getting all the advantages it has of being the global currency? So I've seen things like that, and I began thinking and saying, at some point in time, we run the risk of actually losing this position, and that's going to severely affect the United States. And people don't think about that. People think it's never going to happen, and yet I think at some point it's probable that it will happen. So then I began thinking, what about if you had this group of speculators that actually made it happen over an accelerated time frame, that actually attacked the dollar? And that's when I came up with this thing about $1 Down.
And I know you'll get onto this, but what's interesting is you've seen what happens when a currency collapses. I know you've seen this firsthand, and obviously it's not the US dollar, but I assume that the consequence of that happen? Well, what is the consequence of seeing firsthand a currency collapse in front of you? What happens in the first 24 hours, as an example?
That's a great question. A currency generally collapses over time, but over an accelerated time frame. And I'll give you an example. In 1994, I was working in Mexico, and I was, in December of '94, they started running into trouble. There's some mismanagement of the Mexican peso. In the month of December, it lost 35% of its value. And then in '95, a few months after that, they had to replace the currency with a new currency called Nuevo Peso, the new peso. And here, I knew a family that had struggled for years to save 100,000 pesos, more or less. The new currency, one of the new pesos was worth 1,000 of the old pesos. So imagine you struggled for years to save 100,000 pesos. You felt you were doing pretty well, and then all of a sudden, it's not worth 100,000 pesos, it's worth 100. And so a currency crisis, this is the thing, a currency crisis is a human crisis because people's wages don't keep up. You go to the store, you can't afford basic food items like flour, sugar, milk. You can't get access to things. And generally, because most of these countries that have these currency crises have their debts denominated in dollars, they have to print more of their currency to pay back the equivalent of their currency on their dollar debt. So you print more and more and more, and the inflation just goes crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, last year, Venezuela, I was involved in that as well. And in 2006 to 2009, they had a serious crisis. They're still having that crisis now. They had inflation of 800% last year.
I can't imagine that.
How do you live with 800% inflation? And that's why you see the protests right now in Venezuela. They're going in the streets because they can't take it anymore. I mean,
so does that mean literally you could buy a loaf of bread for argument's sake, the equivalent of $1 one day, and next day literally it could be $800? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, that over a year, if you
but even so.
But even in a day, they're updating prices all day. So you walk out in the streets and there's chaos, and people are hurting. So again, a currency crisis is a human crisis.
And I know it goes into this in detail in the script. I mean, that's the whole point of the script. Would you say that, a bit of a silly question here because I know you explore it, there are mechanisms available right now with enough time, energy and money and drive, the US dollar could be destabilised to that extent? I know it would take a lot, but it is a distinct possibility if you had the resources.
Yes. I think for that to happen, first of all, the petrodollar system has to collapse. And I've seen things where China and Russia are working to undermine the petrodollar system. All that means is that when you buy oil, you have to pay dollars.
Yeah.
And so that's been the case since the early 70s. We struck that agreement with Saudi Arabia. That's one thing. If you destroy in fact, in the script, I have a Russian in there who says, we have to kill the golden goose that's protecting the dollar. We're going to go after the petrodollar system. So if that unravels quickly. And
that's the big thing. Is that the big thing?
I think right now that's the big thing. But also, if you look at a lot of the financial systems, they are the futures contracts, the actual systems themselves are dollar denominated. And if you look at a huge country like China, they're working, and Russia, they're working to create similar systems for their currencies. Once that happens, again, the demise of the dollar as a global currency will accelerate.
And of course the problem is that China and Russia are huge countries with huge reserves.
That's right.
And that is a huge problem because particularly I know China, I don't know enough about it, but China's economy is a little bit false, isn't it, to be fair?
Right.
But even so, they still have vast resources they can call on.
Yeah, they have several $1 trillion in hard reserves. 1.3, 1.4 trillion are in US dollars, and they are slowly diversifying it out. Another thing they're doing, Steve, is they're accumulating gold. Okay, they're starting to. I've spent a lot of time in South America. They're buying mining. They've been buying mining operations, so it's harder to track how much gold they're actually accumulated. They're also buying gold out on the market. So by accumulating gold to back up their currency, by modifying some of these international financial systems that are so tied to the dollar, and by destroying the petrodollar system, you got a situation in which it is likely at some point in the medium-term future that the dollar will no longer be the global currency. And then the U.S. will not be able to monetize its debt. Then we'll be just like every other country. And so that's one of the things that this film does, or the script, and hopefully it'll be made into a film. It's
Yeah.
going to cause people to think. I mean, there's a lot of action in there. You know, we've got another story in there with the
Yeah.
Jenkins family, but
The protagonist.
yeah, the protagonist.
I mean, he's intricately, well, I'll leave you to tell us exactly how he's drawn into the story and how he fits into this.
The beauty about Dollar Down is it's the story of second chances in life. You know, we all make mistakes. I certainly have made my share. Some of us make colossal mistakes. And so Dollar Down is the story of second chances for a man, second chances for a nation, in this case America. Because in this script, America is blinded by greed and arrogance. The protagonist, Brad Jenkins, is a gentleman who is a financial executive. Oddly enough, he specializes in U.S. Latin American business.
Well, yeah, but you know what they say, write what you know, don't they?
That's right.
You've got to write what you know.
That's right. And I think that gives credibility to the film.
Yeah, of course,
So
yeah,
that's why I did that. So this is a man who had it all. He was a successful financial executive, married to a wife that loved him, had 2 great kids, and then through a very unfortunate and tragic event, his wife and small son died. And it devastated him. And he couldn't recover. He blamed himself because of the event, and that prison of guilt just thrust him into a downward spiral, and he became a defeated man. But fortunately for Brad, he had the really unconditional love of his 10-year-old daughter, Liliana, and his feisty 89-year-old grandfather, Pops Jenkins. Remember Pops in the script?
Yeah.
Pops is the guy, I described him, think of Santa Claus in a cowboy outfit, real feisty, that's Pops. So he's got their support to help him navigate that horrific journey in search of redemption, to try to find himself again. So you have these 2 stories. You have this one world of the elitist bankers that have positioned themselves to reap a windfall profit by causing a massive wealth transfer to them by attacking and wrecking the dollar as a global currency. You have that world. And then you have this other world in which you have a man who's become a defeated man who is just enduring life. He doesn't know how to live life. He's just enduring day by day.
Yeah.
And yet before him he still has a great family, people that love him. So you have these 2 worlds, a man in search of redemption and this sinister group of bankers. And at some point, that world collides, and look out, because there's a lot of action in this movie.
So how would you frame, for instance, the protagonist in this? Where did you get the idea for him? I know it's a group of people. There's one in particular, isn't there, I believe. So how did you get into? I can understand how you would kind of build the hero, for want of a better word, but how would you draw on experience to come up with the anti-hero in this, or the protagonist in this?
Well, for the main character, the protagonist would be Brad Jenkins, and then the antagonist would be he is a Brazilian billionaire. His name is Alexandre Santos, so I call him Santos. All the bad guys I call by their last name in the script. All the good guys.
You haven't based them on someone you know, I guess.
Yes.
You have.
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's intriguing.
There actually is a person like this, much older. And
not intent on bringing down the dollar, I hope. Oh no! Don't you know? You're scaring me.
But like I say, there are people, very powerful people in this world that are not satisfied with the dollar being the global currency. And so, but what I wanted is, I wanted the bad guy, the antagonist, to be likable. So in the script, I say that he's devilishly handsome, charismatic.
Sounds like me.
Exactly. And he's the kind of guy. He's likable. He's a bad guy, but he's likable. But in the script, in the dialogue of the script, it's very elite, very formal, very eloquent. So when Santos speaks, it's very eloquently. And he uses a lot of these traditional phrases, a fool returns to his folly, and all these phrases that are very eloquent. And every word he speaks is incredibly eloquent. And again, I do that to contrast the dialogue of the everyday dialogue that in the Jenkins family with this elite world to show verbally how that is. And so he's a guy that he's so rich and he's so powerful that this is a game to him. You know, wrecking a country, wrecking a currency, it's just a game to him because he's already very wealthy. He's already, you know, doesn't have to worry about anything. So at this point is, how much richer can I get? And so you've got this guy and he puts together this team, and that's what this is. And again, what I tried to do is to make him a very evil person because he's very selfish and he doesn't care about people. He wants to make money no matter what. But at the same time, you know, he's likable.
So is he kind of doing it for, in a way, a bit of fun as well?
Yes.
Which is actually darker in a way because there's no scruples or morals, I guess.
Right.
You're doing it just for a bit of fun as well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at him and you see the way he thinks and how selfish he is, and you know, you think, man, that guy's he's a bad guy, but he's funny and he's very he's courteous, and you know, he just has this charisma to where it's hard to hate him, you know, with a passion. But you recognize this guy, man, he's out to just enrich himself and take advantage of the whole world. So he's a bad guy.
And how did you? I know you've a lot of it's drawn from you and your career, which is massively helpful. But even so, I guess you've still got to do a hell of a lot of research, not just to do with the characters and the situations they're in and the whole story. But how long did the whole research? But even before you put pen to paper or fingers to keyboards these days, but what's the research process and how long did that last?
The research took a long time. I started the research well before I was actually started on the typing the screenplay because you know, I know a lot about this, but I wanted to make it very realistic. You made an excellent point earlier about writing about what you know, and therefore that gives credibility to a script.
Yeah.
So I did a considerable amount of research, but it wasn't just technical research.
No.
It was okay. If this were going to happen over an accelerated time frame, what are the things that would have to happen and unfold to cause the dollar to collapse? That was one. But another one was to learn how to write a screenplay because I didn't know how.
Well, you see, that kind of leads me on to the second part of the question, which was, I know you hadn't, so what did you go through to learn for the learning process? Because I know it's a very difficult process, and I know it's very time consuming, and we've talked about this on the phone that you would work late into the night, early hours of the morning to get a lot of work done, but I assume, I know, again, we've talked, but just for the benefit of the camera, writing classes or script classes, honing the skill down, was that all a bit of a shocker than you? Was that difficult to although you seem very meticulous, I can't imagine it being too difficult for you to pick it up, but even so, you still got to go through that. What was the process and how enjoyable was that?
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this because hopefully the process which I chose will help others. I'm a very disciplined person, and so what I decided to do, I went out online and I looked at some of the scripts of my favorite movies, and there's some really great ones out there. And I checked to make sure we had the DVDs because we have a library of DVDs.
Yeah.
My wife and I and my two children, we love movies.
You didn't match it as it went through to make it really?
That's exactly what I did.
To make sure it's exact. And how often was it completely different to the script?
What I found is, in many cases, the dialogue was right on, but a lot of the depth that you would find, for example, in a novel, was not there.
Right.
The screenplay was richer in depth and richer. For example, True Lies had a whole section there about Arnold Schwarzenegger's relationship with his daughter that they completely cut out.
Right.
It really, you know, in that screenplay, it really explained that relationship. It was a complex relationship that you didn't really get when you saw the movie. I'm sure that because of cost considerations, they probably
into running times and all sorts of things, yeah.
Exactly.
Because it's still quite a long film. It's well over 2 hours, I seem to remember.
Yes, it was a long film.
But they even cut that just to keep it. Right, okay.
So I saw that, I said, wow, so I said, whatever I write is probably going to get cut down, but that's fine. That's the editor, producers, that's director's job. I'm just going to write it, and then we can polish it and edit it as we want to. But I would look at, and I would, I travel a lot, and so I would be in these hotels in Mexico, in Brazil, wherever I was, and I would watch a scene.
Yeah.
first of all, I'd read that scene on the screenplay, then I'd watch the scene, and I did it scene by scene about 1 to 2 minutes worth, and I would see exactly how the screenplay text translated into film and movement and action and thought. So that's the way I did it, and it worked real well. Again, you have to accommodate for the fact that even the final screenplays are not what show up in the film, the final film, but it's a wonderful way to do that, but it's very time consuming. So to your other question, it took, I'd say several months of doing that to where I felt, okay, I understand the mechanism and the structure of screenwriting. I'm not a 20-year polished Hollywood executive, and the screenplay I write's not going to be polished and perfect, but I understand the structure, so I'm going to get started on this.
And the end that was on, we should point out it's won lots of awards and has been nominated a heck of a lot of times in different festivals. When you were going through the process, when you're putting all together, was it as difficult as you imagine, or was there any point you reached and thought, actually, this is a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be? Or do you just go with the flow and accept that it is what it is, and actually, come hell or high water, you're going to get to the end?
After going through the learning of the structure of screenwriting, after that it became more creative. And when the creative juices started flowing, once I had the outline, it wasn't that difficult. It's about what I expected it would be. But it's a lot of work. I mean, if someone really wants to do a good job, they're going to have to spend a lot of time. And I spent weeks and weeks, going over iteration after iteration after I had the outline. So if you're devoted and it's something that you really want to do, you'll find a way to find the time, even if you're doing other jobs, you have other responsibilities.
Because we should point out, you have a full-time career.
That's right.
That's the thing, as you said earlier, you're travelling a lot, so you've got to juggle all this in, hence the late nights, burning the midnight oil and all of that.
That's right. But to finish this up, I did have to take time off. I might recommend that a person schedule a vacation. I did it over Christmas holidays. If you want, you're going to need, I think, a good 2 weeks, 3 weeks of just going over it. And I would, Christmas worked really well for me, because if you don't, it's just really tough. You need at the end to go over it and make sure you got it perfect. You're gonna have to take some time off because it's not something you can do 3 or 4 hours late at night and get it just the way you want. But if you're disciplined, you'll get it done. And if it's really a project of passion.
And when you say holiday, did you have a vacation after you'd finished it? Just what?
No.
You just I'm running with this now, because I was imagining your brain's not scrambled, but it's done, it's finished, and I now need some time off. But you were just too into it, and I suppose actually that's when you started sending it to the festivals and getting it right. Okay.
That's exactly what happened. I finished it on January the 4th. Then I had to start with the copyright, and life goes on.
With a copyright?
Yes.
Oh, now what do you mean? What do you mean by that? So you finished it, but then what's that? What does that entail?
Because it is a written work, I sent it to the U.S. Copyright Office, and so it takes a long time, but it's retroactive. So I sent it on January the 4th, and electronically you can upload your script and to the U.S. Copyright Office, and it takes, they say, 12 to 18 months till they actually send you the copyright certificate, but
you can still get it out there. Right, okay, so because I'm suddenly thinking, shit, well, how did you manage to, but you explained it. So that once you've got it uploaded and they've confirmed they've received it, you can then do what you like, because it's kind of protected then, yeah?
Right, and that was part of the research I did, Steve. You talked about the research. I did a lot of research, how to write a script, the technical aspects of the dollar, and then also actual how to protect my intellectual property. And because I've, in my job, I've seen we run into issues in other countries where we didn't have our products protected. So I said, I'm going to make sure that I do this. So I would suggest to everyone that's at least in the U.S. that they file with the U.S. Copyright Office immediately, upload that, and get copyright protection. Legally, that's the best thing you can do. There are other things you can do. You get it protected in other, I think, writing unions and stuff, and I researched that. But if someone were to ever try to steal your work,
plagiarize part of it or whatever,
then you've got it protected, and so that's the most solid protection you can get.
Okay, and just finally, obviously you're happy with it. Are you is this the final iteration of it, or can you even now think, actually, I'll just twist this slightly, adjust this slightly? Actually, I think you alluded to this earlier about cannons, because you are,
Right.
of course, still adjusting, I guess.
Yeah, you know, I on the flight over here, I was talking to my wife, and I was tempted to make some tweaks to it. There's always things you get further thoughts. And
Trouble is, it's endless, isn't it?
it is, but at some point you have to say, look, it's a good story, and each director, I think, and I don't know this business, you know, I know manufacturing in Latin America and the United States, but I've done a lot of research, and what I've seen in my research is that each director and producer, they're going to have their own style, preferences, and they're going to make changes in it. So changes will, I think if you're not flexible enough to say, I will allow these changes and I'm not going to get upset, then, you know, just accept the fact that there will be change. So it will be changed. But, you know, I don't know. I've gotten a lot of feedback from these film festivals in which I've entered. I've gotten things back. And the thing is, Steve, some of them is conflicting. Some will say, you know, I love this, but you need to prepare, you need to revise that. And then others, they'll say, I love the thing that they say I need to revise. And so it's confusing, you know, where the opinions are just all over the screen. So that's when I said, wow, how do I process all of this feedback? And so I've been hesitant to change it. But again, it will be, you know, I'm perfectly happy to work if I'm lucky enough to sell it and get it made into a movie. I'm happy to work with another screenwriter that a studio might have and make any changes they need to.
Brilliant. J. Michael, that's it.
Steve, I appreciate it.
No, that was brilliant.